How do we go about shredding visceral fat?
We studied this for 7 years for the National Science Foundation, and I've studied it ever since. And here's what we learned. We worked with the U.S. military. We worked with law enforcement in the United States, local, county, and state troopers, state police, and firefighters. And what we found is when you tell them what to do, they don't do it. Even when they want to, they don't do it. But you know what makes a difference? What people seem to need to be able to do is see the disease inside of them. It's this imaginary boogeyman that you're supposed to be doing these things to stop, that you don't even know whether he or she is really inside of you. But when you get an MRI, Joe, it ends the lie. You're not as healthy as you think. And when humans see all that disease inside of them, then they get very motivated and they became far more successful at eliminating visceral fat. So if your audience is listening today and they're grabbing their headphones and they're like, good Lord, I got to get rid of this stuff, then to start, I would get an MRI and see the amount of disease that you have inside of your abdomen, all that inflammatory fat collecting around your heart, and all the fat in your muscle. And a lot of people don't realize that fat around the heart is really present. And you can even see it now. Unfortunately, we're able to show it in autopsies. So I'll just show you a picture of that inflammatory fat that encases a heart so you can see it. That's what it looks like. It surrounds the heart, this inflammatory collection of fat, and it literally causes the arteries to become diseased and clogged. And so the very best thing is if you had surgery, like when you're having surgery and the surgeon would take a video and say, man, do you suck inside? The next best thing is to be able to show that fat around your heart on an MRI. That's a guy who's 73 years old, managing director of Price Waterhouse Cooper, and then he reduces his heart fat, this much, and let me bring it down a little bit, in just 3 months, significant reduction in that heart fat because he saw it. You got to see the boogeyman in real life, and then you become really terrified instead of just hearing about the boogeyman. So get an MRI wherever you're at, and if you can't get an MRI, because maybe you have a defibrillator or you have a cochlear implant or some other surgical implant that's impairing your ability to be scanned because you can't go into a magnetic field because MRIs use safe magnetic fields instead of radiation. Then you can get a CT. So the CT scans. Oftentimes, women get CT scans of their abdomen, and you can see visceral fat in a CT scan. So it's not something that's unique and only visible by MRI. So many women have had CT scans, and you can get, I thought I had a CT scan in here, but unfortunately I don't. Oh yeah, I do. Here it is. So CT scans are just the opposite. Visceral fat shows up as black instead of white, and muscle shows up as white. So here's a CT scan, and you can see all that black and all that visceral fat inside. So to answer your question, get a scan. If you've ever had an existing scan, we can read it too.
So point one, let's get an MRI scan. Let's see the boogeyman. Hopefully there's nothing there, but I imagine that there's a good chance that it is. So unfortunately, it's come back now. We've got a lot of visceral fat. What do we do then? What are we attacking? How are we doing it?
Yeah. So the big things, the first and most important thing that you want to do is cut out cut out processed foods. So the best example of that is a very interesting series of scans that we did in this 68-year-old guy who was filled with visceral fat, filled with fat in his muscle. And then in just 2 weeks, Joe, you can see his visceral fat is reduced. And after 35 weeks, it's substantially reduced. And he goes from having a dad bod to having an abdomen like a 20-year-old collegiate athlete. He's got a six-pack, on his MRI. His muscles are free of that fat. His visceral fat is significantly reduced. His shape is and he's 68 years old. And he only did one thing. And this is what I always tell people on podcasts. And for sure, I have my clients doing this, is to cut out processed foods, reduce carbohydrates, especially processed carbohydrates, but cutting out all processed foods. That's the only thing this guy did was he cut out processed foods. He did not exercise 1 minute, not 1 minute. So key to getting rid of processed foods is to start eating correctly, or to eliminate visceral fat is to cut out processed foods and start eating correctly. So eating clean, and the best diet I recommend is what I call the living carnivore diet. And what that is eating meat with living probiotic fermented foods. So like fermented kimchi, fermented sauerkraut, fermented yogurt, fermented kefir, fermented kvass, fermented beets. Fermented foods have microbes in them that actually go down and colonize your gastrointestinal tract and help you absorb more nutrients and protect you from toxins. So it's another great big secret that most people don't know about is the value of eating probiotic fermented foods. And it's most traditional people, Joe, they have a practice or a tradition of eating fermented foods. And it's a practice, it's a tradition because of the health benefits that are derived from it. So cut out processed foods, eat fermented foods, and then the type of exercise you want to do is not durational exercise. You don't want to jog. You don't want to be a distance runner. So this guy is a distance runner, is a marathoner. He did 10 to 12 marathons a year. He was only 34. He had this big chunk of fat around his heart. And we see this in a lot of distance runners.
Which is a paradox, right?
Yeah, it's you think that you don't have any fat. They're trophies. I mean, the reality is this guy, you don't see any fat on the outside. He's got like nothing. He was like super skinny. That's the way marathoners look like. But he's a trophy. He's fat inside, but thin outside. And here's another example of another runner filled with visceral fat inside. And look how different he looked in 2 months, because we got him to stop running and just jogging, no more running or jogging, and to only sprint. So what you want to do is do what is more primal, what is more ancestral. We didn't go out and jog. We didn't have lifestyles like that. We busted ass in a sprint to save our lives or to save the lives of our children or, our fellow Klansmen. So we sprinted, and sprinting eliminates visceral fat in a very short period of time. So there's that. And we have there's so many things, don't even have time to get into it, and we got to leave some stuff for people to work with us. But we have 48 things that we specialize in, and we figured out over these, over a decade now, specializing in visceral fat, how to get rid of it. And there's, over 48 specific strategies. But those are the big ones that I will share with your audience just because they're awesome enough to follow you and your great content. I want to share those really critically important things that they can get started on. But the discerning man or woman is going to pay attention to a health optimizing physician when he says thousands and of these people would not eliminate visceral fat until they saw the fat inside of them. It's life changing. So spend the money. It's, they're about anywhere from $100 in some spots in the US to maybe on average around $300 or $400 to get an MRI, and well worth the money.
In one of your tweets, you said, fasting lets you take out the trash. A prolonged 72-hour fast purges dead and diseased cells, tissues, tumors, inflammation. Stop eating every day and let your body go into repair mode. I'm curious, would that also be an effective strategy? I'm not saying necessarily 72 hours, but would also maybe 72 hours you would also recommend. I'm curious there. But is fasting also something that you would recommend to bring down that level of visceral fat?
Absolutely. And here's the interesting thing. Not only does it burn visceral fat, but here's the very interesting thing. When we incorporated extended fasting into our practice, for our client patients that work with us to become literally the healthiest people in the world, what we found was superficial, protective, beneficial, super subcutaneous fat was preserved and even increased with fasting. How about that? How about that, ladies and gentlemen? You fast and you actually increase a type of fat in your body when you fast. But it's not any fat. It's magical fat that protects you from disease. And so this is what our ancestors did. Now, they didn't go out and say, okay, clan folk, it's time for us to do a fast for 7 days. No. Mother Nature said, you're not going to be successful on the hunt this week or the next month, and you're not going to get any food. So extended fasting really is a consequence to life. And so our ancestors would have been deprived the ability to be successful on hunts. They would have put on superficial subcutaneous fat, which is a better source of energy, protects you from disease, and protects you from that visceral fat. So extended fasting, Joe, great question. You got another golden nugget out for your audience.